In this video, we will think about evidence-based ways to improve your sleep. There's growing evidence of the harm of poor sleep. Most of us know this, but we're too busy to read all the scientific literature on what works. In this video, I'll be summarizing the best advice from two of the most helpful books on the topic, and I'll be telling you about which tech I use to help me implement each of the strategies. The two books that I've read that have been particularly helpful is Lifetime by Russell Foster, which outlines the science around biological rhythms, and Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, which outlines health outcomes related to poor sleep, as well as evidence-based strategies on improving sleep. Strategy number 1, the 20-minute rule. This is the idea that you shouldn't lie in bed for longer than 20 minutes awake. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly 20 minutes, it could be half an hour, it could be 15, but it's the idea that you shouldn't sit in bed awake for long periods of time. You want to associate your bed with sleep and with good quality sleep. So rather than staying in bed, you should get out of your bed, ideally sit somewhere with low light, because light is a cue to be awake and cues your body to wake up. So what I use is my dumb phone, as I call it. It's my phone with all the apps removed. It's a secondary phone that I use. And it just has audio apps, audiobook apps. So I just go to Audible and listen to an audiobook usually, or that's kind of a shortcut to a playlist. That's kind of what I use for the 20-minute rule. Strategy number 2. Bed when sleepy. What do I mean by that? So I mean that you only go to bed when you feel sleepy. Now, sleepiness is different from being tired. You can be tired all day. Sleepiness is when your eyes start to feel heavy and start to drop, and then that's when you know you should go to bed. And again, this stops you from going to bed really early and lying in bed awake. So what I use to help me with this is usually before bed I try and read, and I go to a corner of the bedroom with my chair which is low light. And one thing that helps me to not stay awake for ages is this timer. So normally for a lot of things I use this timer, which is fine and kind of goes down. It's really useful. But this one can be put, I can see it in a dark room. The lights are particularly low. So yeah, and so what you can do is you can set the time for any amount of time, and then you just push it in, and then it acts as a timer, and then it basically flashes. You can turn the volume down, so it just flashes when time's up, and that's a good reminder that, you know, not to sort of keep staying awake if I'm sleepy, but to go to bed. So that's kind of what I use for that one. Tip number 3. Having a really good sleep routine is so helpful. And having particular things that you do before bed, particular routines. So I might get ready for work, brush my teeth. I then check off which particular habits that I've done that day, and I usually listen to a bit of an audio book. And so one thing that I've found helpful in terms of that is this smart plug. So this is one by Miros. What I've done is I've used this in various places with speakers and lights, and so at a certain time, this will actually trigger and turn off the device or turn off certain lights and speakers, which again is another reminder of my routine to sort of get ready for bed. So I find this is quite helpful in terms of turning things off and helping me to get ready for bed and not stay up really late. Tip number 4. one of the things in Lifetime that he talks about is how eating several hours before can affect your sleep. And he goes into detail in this book about how the digestion, and I'm no doctor, so I don't understand all the different processes, but essentially, when the body tries to break down food, particularly glucose, the body raises in temperature, and in order to fall asleep, your body actually needs to drop in temperature, and so these two things conflict with each other. So not eating before is is such a helpful thing. Now, the app is used to track calories, but on there you can actually track the amount of time you're fasting for. And I try and fast. I don't eat in the mornings. I usually eat first thing at kind of 12, 1 o'clock. And so trying to track the amount of time you fasted and try not to eat after dinner, which is really difficult, using that app can be particularly helpful in terms of helping you to become more aware of, and I guess treat it as a goal of not eating before bed. Next tip: a consistent bedtime and wake time. What creates good sleep is consistency, particularly with the time. And one of the things they recommend is going to bed and waking up at the same time every day. And what typically happens for most of us is we go to bed fairly early in the week and wake up early, but on weekends we tend to sleep for a lot longer and wake up later, and maybe go to bed later. But actually trying to be consistent with our bed and wake times is so important. And one thing that can be helpful with that is an alarm clock, which has an alarm to wake up, but also an alarm to go to bed. And again, that can help you to be consistent, as well as the smart plug and the timer with your bedtime. Tip number 6: bright light in the morning and low light in the evening. Yeah, so light is the main way that the body is cued to wake up and go to sleep. And back before the invention of electricity and artificial light, the sun was the main way that our body knew what was what in terms of going to bed and waking up. But with electricity, that has majorly affected and shifted our biological rhythms. So exposing yourself to bright light, particularly straight away, ideally outside light, but if not, bright light indoors, first thing straight away. So I usually in the morning when I use the bathroom put the bright lights on, and then in the evenings I have dim light everywhere. So again, so this is Miros again, it's inexpensive. I'll put links to all these products in the description. And so this is quite a good, fairly cheap light bulb, which then dims at a certain time. So I think it's like 5:30, 6 it will dim, and many light bulbs in the house will dim. And so again, this helps with cueing my body to go to sleep. And the last tip, which I think is probably the most helpful tip, is work out your chronotype. So what is a chronotype? So you've heard people mention, oh, I'm a night owl. I can work late into the evening. Um, and it used to be that people thought that was just, not true and a stereotype. But actually, there's a lot of scientific evidence that shows that the chronotype and when your peak time is and when your body naturally wakes up makes a big difference in terms of the quality of sleep. And trying to force yourself to sleep in a pattern which is against your chronotype can then cause you a lot of issues. And this is obviously particularly tricky in a society where we're quite wedded to the 9 to 5. And if you're someone who's particularly an early bird, then that doesn't really work. You usually peak at 7 a.m. But equally, if you're a night owl and you mainly work in the evenings, then that isn't great. And so, this isn't a bit of tech, but it's a particular measure that you can use, which is so helpful in terms of discovering what chronotype you are. First questionnaire is the morning eveningness questionnaire, the MEQ, which is a really good quick questionnaire. You can do it online. I'll leave the links in the description. And this kind of tells you roughly what kind of person you are, and it rates it according to being a definite evening all the way down to a definite morning person. And so that's quite useful, the MEQ. If you want a much more in-depth questionnaire, it takes a bit longer to fill out, but it's probably more helpful, is the Munich Chronotype Questionnaire, the MCTQ. So this goes into much more detail into kind of your sleeping patterns, and this can be perhaps more helpful, but it just takes longer to fill out. So those are my 8 tips on how to improve your sleep. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe, and you might want to watch the other video that I did on how to read classic literature, where I outlined some tips on how to digest some of the more challenging works of fiction. Okay, that's all for me. See you in the next one. Bye.